What's up, everybody? Welcome to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Jesse Cofield holding it down for the DraftKings studio in Boston. No Mike Golic Sr. today. My father was on the call for Monday Night Football last night with Westwood One, which means we get Fox Sports football host Fox Sports radio host, Yahoo Sports football host, Jason Fitz, joining us here in place of my father. Jason, what's going on, man? I feel like the last time we had you around here, we couldn't share your title. We couldn't tell people what you were doing. And now you're doing so many great things.
Thank you. And you're burying the lead, though. Come on, Mike. You're a little impressed. You know, last night, if anybody follows me on social media, I was going after it during my beloved Raiders game. I am here. I am fully professional. I am awake and ready to go. A lot of Vegas bombs consumed last night. Didn't even know what a Vegas bomb was last night. And all of a sudden, bam, I'm in it. Let's go.
Okay, so what's a Vegas bomb?
So I learned this. It is Crown and coconut rum and peach schnapps in a shot glass that you drop into a sugar-free Red Bull, and you take it. The first several went down easy. The last few was just, at that point, it was point principle. That took a little bit of time. Took a little work and energy to get those down.
I love that you're doing peach schnapps into sugar-free Red Bull. Okay.
Right, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. It's
called moderation.
The balance of the universe.
Yeah,
Namaste. The light in me respects the light in you. We are brought to you by Wrangler, made for the ride of life. Save 15% on your first Wrangler.com order with promo code GOJO15. Got a banger today for you guys. Zack Moss, Colts running back, coming off an absolutely legendary game this weekend. Going to join us in a little bit, as well as Eric Byrnes, former major leaguer. Get us right after some wild MLB action in the first couple of days. I'm still reeling from the fact that, last night, Fitz's beloved Raiders, for anyone that doesn't know, Jason Fitz, a lifelong diehard Raiders fan, so much so that in his 40s, he found out what a Vegas bomb was for the first time. I'm amazed. I must be really scummy, the fact that I heard Vegas bomb and just immediately felt like college again. Jesse and I are around the same age, and Fitz, I just figured your life on tour at one point. For anyone who doesn't know, Jason Fitz was the longtime fiddle player in the band Perry, and Fitz, I thought for sure you would just be drowning in Vegas bombs during your time.
There's this weird gap that happens, Mike, though, right? Like cartoons. Like, you and I share a love of cartoons, but we don't share a love of the same cartoons sometimes, because you reach a spot where you're too old to really be, engaged in the new anime cartoon that's out. You just miss that chapter of life. And then you wake up one day, you find out you're a little out of touch with what you kids like, right? And this is where the Vegas bomb has to fall. Like, I come from a Jaeger bomb world, and believe me, as a particular connoisseur of Jaeger, I'm all in on Jaeger bombs. I like these things, but I know I'm that guy. But I walk into the bar.
What was wrong with us? For an era and a time, we just decided to do an anything bomb, and you could just combine some sort of alcohol with some sort of Red Bull, and that was going to be the thing that got you through the night. And as if that sort of upper and downer in the same breath was something that was at all good for my body. What a terrifying time.
I mean, or a time of delight. Like, you realize how to extend your party a little bit later. Let's go, So I look at it like, when you're an old dude and you're like, Jaeger bombs, you wake up one day and you're like, oh, wait, the kids have figured out new versions of the bombs. Let's see what they've got. And hence the Vegas bomb. Really, it had the name Vegas in it. I'm watching the Vegas Raiders. I have to try it. That was really the logic. That's as much as it, twist my arm to put different new weird alcoholic drinks in my body, that. But at least it wasn't my usual Raiders ritual of a dozen donuts and, a couple of 2-liter bottles of diet root beer. Like, I veered it up. So now the question is, you win. Does that mean next weekend I have to slam a bunch of Vegas bombs? Okay. I'm in.
I was just going to ask that, because while I am a huge fan of Notre Dame football, your Raiders get a 17-13 win. You are much more of the traditional fan when it comes to superstitions and all the things you're going to do around your team. And while it wasn't a perfect performance by any stretch of the imagination, it was an ugly but competitive game by both teams. You did win, as you pointed out. So it feels like, unless you do your duty of rocking Vegas bombs next time the Raiders are playing, you're letting the team down. And I don't know how you could live with yourself with that.
2 years ago, the Raiders went on a little mini winning streak at the beginning of the year, and I realized that I'd watched game one from Allegiant standing the whole time. So I decided that I wasn't going to sit during a Raiders game until they lost. So that's where things go. So yeah, I think this is the commitment to excellence, just win, baby, that you need out of this. And by the way, I'm offended you would say it wasn't a pretty. Your dad would stand up to you, good sir, and say, great defense can still make for a beautiful win. Max Crosby and that defense played far better than anybody expected. Jordan Love, not that long ago, was out there and was the media darling for everybody. They picked Jordan Love off multiple times in that game, including a beautiful interception to seal the game at the end of the game from a short guy, no less. Like, I mean, look, I think there was a lot of pretty in this, particularly Max Crosby's play. So you, good sir, are wrong. Any win is a pretty win, but a defensive win should also be considered beautiful.
I mean, it fits right in with Josh McDaniels' line of decision-making. I'm sorry, that decision at the 2-minute drill, 4th and 2 with 2 minutes left, the decision to not go for it in the plus 34, once again, cowardice. I cannot believe the 4th down decision-making and the late-game decision-making from Josh McDaniels this year has only been covered up by Brandon Staley and everyone's public disdain for his 4th down decision-making. But Fitz, there's no way, even as frugally conservative as you are, even as cheap and as risk averse as you are, part of you had to look at that and go, the way the Raiders were running the ball that night, you got to put it in the hand of Josh Jacobs, try and get 2 yards and end that game on your own terms. When you're up 4, like kicking the field goal, they're still going to go down and be trying to score a touchdown. It just means you're either tied and going to overtime or you got just enough to lose by 1.
Yeah, it said to me, I trust my kicker, which makes sense. Daniel Carlson's great. But it also said, I do not trust my offense or my defense. And that's a weird message to send because you're essentially saying we got to protect ourselves to get to overtime. That doesn't make a lot of sense. Offensively, though, remember earlier in the game, they had a 4th and 1. And instead of running Josh Jacobs right up the gut or trying their version of the tush push, brotherly shove, whatever we want to call it, they ran a little strange sweep action out to the outside that took Josh Jacobs giving it an incredible block to make it happen. Like, so there are moments for Josh Jacobs, or for Josh McDaniels, I should say, where I'm sitting here saying, I don't understand the play calling and I don't understand the logic behind it. So I'm with you. I think it was the wrong call at the wrong time, and the analytics say that, and it shows no trust. I also don't know that I would have trusted Josh McDaniels to call the simple play and just get the first down. Like, it's a disaster right now when you think about how bad that offensive line has been at times, how bad the play calling's been at times, how inconsistent the offense has been. Keep in mind, Josh McDaniels is supposed to be an offensive guru. The Raiders still haven't hit 20 points this season in any game.
Yeah, that's what I always like to remind people is anytime your coach starts to get on the hot seat, it's usually because whatever their background is, whichever side of the ball they came up on, were a coordinator on, cut their teeth on, is the one that's failing. See Brandon Staley, who we just mentioned with the Chargers, who's supposed to be the defensive head coach and has had a defense that has struggled mightily, especially to stop the run since he got to Los Angeles. And now it's the same thing for Josh McDaniels, same story there. So Fitz, that's a good segue into what I wanted to ask you, because the Raiders do get a win last night against a Green Bay team that people looked as a live dog in this year's NFC North, where, all right, the Lions are the favorite, but people still are kind of afraid to buy all the way in. Not me, because Dan Campbell hive stand up, but some people are still afraid to buy in because they're the Lions, and there's that fear that it's going to be the same old Lions that show up at some point. And because Matt LaFleur is a good head coach, because there's other things in place outside of the quarterback that we can talk about in Green Bay, you get a good win on Monday Night Football. You slow a roll that had been going on in that organization. But realistically, what does this do? Like, what was success in your mind before the season for this Las Vegas Raiders team? What did that look like? And does it change at all demonstrably based on the results you got last night?
No, and by the way, I love the idea of you being a Dan Campbell stand with like a puff paint and making a little street team Dan Campbell shirt. Like, I need this in my life. But I'll say,
my sister actually bought one of those and she plans to give birth in it.
A puff paint shirt, or Dan Campbell shirt, or puff paint?
A Dan Campbell shirt, not a puff paint shirt, but it's a Dan Campbell shirt. It's Dan Campbell and then a giant lion on one side. And it's like one of those big graphic t-shirts. It's all black. It's kind of like what I'm wearing right now, but it's got Dan Campbell and a lion on it. And it's one of those oversized t-shirts. And she said that's going to be the shirt she wears when she goes to the hospital to give birth to her daughter.
Yeah, she's, they're going to make her put on a hospital gown. As someone who's given birth, I'll just, I hate to temper her expectations, but yeah.
I fear for the doctor that tries to tell my sister on the verge of childbirth, who's going to be terrifying, and everyone should stay out of her way if you see her, that she can't wear her Dan Campbell t-shirt that day. That's going to be a meltdown of epic proportions.
I by the way, thanks for killing the dream on that. I mean, come on, like we were.
I'm just being realistic here. Like I said, as someone who has given birth to a child, I can tell you that
yeah.
They're going to be like, yeah, you kind of have to wear this hospital gown.
You mean Mike and I don't
like
know
how
a
me
lot
and
about
Fitz
this?
are
Like, that's
reacting to
fair.
this at all as if our opinion counts or our knowledge on this would be superior to Jesse, who's actually done this.
Maybe she could put the shirt on over the hospital gown, but they're gonna be like, okay, like, okay.
Is he your husband? No, just love the lines.
Oh God, they're gonna be like, this is so weird.
That's actually pretty similar to what the shirt is right now. For anyone watching us on DraftKings YouTube, as you always can. Yes, I think that's the exact shirt, actually.
Oh my God.
That is. Look, I love the idea of just going shopping for what you think the perfect shirt is to give birth in. Also, like, it does make sense. The more I think about it, the gown makes the gown.
Yeah, it seems incredibly unsanitary to just give birth in whatever you wore coming off the street. There's a number of things that now pop in my head. So yeah, point Jesse on that one there. Yep. The trump card of experience in this very important life process definitely prevails. But Fitz, to your point about the Raiders and what this season was supposed to be and is.
To answer your question, I thought the Raiders were going to be okay this year, not great, right? And when you're in the middle of a 2-year rebuild, I think that's probably a pretty reasonable expectation. The thing we have to remember as a society is that wins and losses is all we care about. But sometimes you just got to ask yourself, is my favorite football team good? And the Raiders, I think, are about to go on a run, right? Because they've got some easy games in front of them. They got the Bears coming up. They got the Patriots coming up. Like, they've got some winnable football games in front of them. When you look at it, they could win a few games in a row. Then they're going to play some good teams. What we have to remember is that this season, there are 3 or 4 teams in the NFL, in the AFC particular, that are very good. And there are 3 or 4 teams that are very bad. And the rest are just a bunch of mediocre teams sort of beating up on each other. I think the Raiders are probably a 6-win team, a 7-win team if everything breaks right. None of that changed based on last night. The biggest concern that this team has is that the offensive line is not good. And I'm not just saying this because I'm hanging out with the former fat guy, but like at some point, the very simple concept that you win in the trenches should be remembered, that the Raiders are losing in the trenches on the offensive side. And other than Max Crosby, they're losing in the trenches on the defensive side. When they play good teams, that will rear its ugly head every single time. So I think the Raiders are about to win some games, and people are going to start hyping them by midseason saying, hey, this team might be better than we thought. The answer is they are not. They got too many holes on both sides of the ball to be a true playoff competitive team. Means instead they'll be stuck in that middle ground of mediocrity and picking somewhere between 8 and 16 in the draft next year just to drive me crazy.
There we go. The circle of hell continues to ring around for Jason Fitz. Interesting point for last night's game that does get you guys a win and the good feelings is it might prompt a little bit of soul searching from the NFL. So many people in the competition committee are worried about banning the brotherly shove, which is dumb and hating material. Instead, they might have to have a conversation about what we saw at the end of the game last night, where Marcus Peters actually saved the game with a horse collar penalty. Jesse, this is a moment that I feel like is going to have people trying to take a look, because he was able to go stop Christian Watson, who had caught a long touchdown pass, looked like he was going to run in, with a penalty, and they ultimately end up keeping them out of the end zone and holding them to a field goal. Yeah,
Watson is literally on his way to the end zone. Peters grabs the back of the collar, flings him down, textbook horse collar. But in that scenario, right, it meant that the Raiders were able to go on and get that win here. So here's what Josh McDaniels had to say after the game about the penalty.
Yeah, talk to Marcus. It's the right penalty. That's a really smart play in a critical time in the game. And if it's the first quarter in the middle of the field, you don't want a horse collar. But if you're saving a touchdown on a long play like that, you at least give yourself a chance to play a few more downs, which he did. And then the defense really rose up and played well. I thought they played well all night for the most part.
So, Gojo, the rule book does contain language that allows a touchdown to be awarded in the event of a palpably unfair act. So I guess the question is, does this qualify?
I mean, I feel like based on that language, it probably should, given the emphasis on horse collar tackling as a rule put in because of player safety. The whole reason, the whole idea behind that was much like we saw with targeting, where you had this instance of players suffering injuries because they were being dragged down from behind by that specific area. And so I don't know how much more letter of the law you would need there. Now, this is one of those spots, Fitz, in theory, it sounds good. It's like the NBA's clear path foul, but for referees in real time to see this and officiate this properly, that's something that I think we should all be rightly concerned about. And that's why I don't expect that to necessarily be something that we see called a lot going forward for the benefit of the offense there, even if, like, letter of the law and spiritually and what you're trying to do as a league and disincentivizing this behavior that could be dangerous to the person being tackled, it probably should be, because what ultimate deterrent would there be? In this spot, it's absolutely the right call. Like, there's certain plays where pass interference is a crime of necessity. You got to do it to make sure you're not going to give up the even bigger play. And here, Josh McDaniels is absolutely right. Marcus Peters saved the game by doing this, by taking that flag in the opportune spot. It was a really smart decision. But it's one where if you're the NFL and you're going to talk about all this player safety stuff as it concerns to the brotherly shove, there's your actual player safety issue right there.
I didn't even know that the clear path rule existed until we were just informed. So shows my ignorance on that. But as I was sitting there watching the game last night, somebody next to me screamed, "What a stupid penalty." And I immediately looked over at him and said, no, it's a +4 penalty, because now you gave yourself a chance to save 4 points. And that's a smart move by a veteran player that's beat. I think the only thing that you would say to the officiating moment of it is you don't know if he had dove at his feet, would he have been able to trip him up? So maybe that's part of the portion of it. But it felt like the right move for Marcus Peters there, he was burned. He had no choice. The league should look at that, though, and I'm sure the fine will be thunder the gods worthy, like in a world where $7,000 for socks. Like, what is it worth when you're turning around doing that? Smart play by a vet player, and yeah, definitely something the league should look at, because it changed the outcome of the game. If that's a touchdown instead of a field goal, we're talking about the rest of that game much differently.
Yeah, it was the right play, but it goes directly against one of your points of emphasis for player safety. So we'll see how they respond to that. Fitz, I want to play this sound for you. This was Jair Alexander, cornerback for the Green Bay Packers, after the game, who had this to say about what he feels like the defense's role has to be going forward with this team.
Yeah, I think at this point it's pretty obvious that the defense has to not give up any touchdowns. I think that's a part of being self-critical of our defense, because the offense is pretty young, and they're still figuring out their mojo. So the defense, we gotta be the ones to score and stop them from scoring.
This is one I encourage people to listen to the audio, because it sounds a lot more damning when it's just written out in text, of this admission, Fitz, that he looks over and sees an incomplete product in their offense right now, that lack of confidence that they appear to have in that Jordan Love-led group. How concerning is that quote to you?
It's concerning, because one of my favorite games to play, whether it's with relationships with friends or relationships in general, is what I like to call shoes on the other foot. So we're going to put the exact same quote into somebody else's situation. If the Jets, if that had been Sauce Gardner saying the same exact thing about the Jets, how apoplectic would the world be going today, right? Like, anytime one side of the ball speaks to the other side of the ball in today's world, I think you have to be particularly careful. And I'm not saying that's right. Like, that's just the way it's going to go. We are going to overanalyze that quote. There's got to be some grace and forgiveness to the fact that Jordan Love is still growing to whoever he's going to be as a quarterback. And I think there is grace and forgiveness to the fact that, hey, this is now Matt LaFleur's offense, and it's going to look a lot different than it did under Aaron Rodgers. Like, go back to who Matt LaFleur was as an offensive coordinator with the Titans, and you can even get an idea of the type of offense he's going to run. Also, they were without Aaron Jones, which I think is a substantial part of why the offense looked incomplete last night. They still ran the ball well without their star running back, right? So you can add all of the bricks up to why the offense didn't look great. But when the defense comes out and says, I think it's pretty obvious we can't even give up a touchdown, you just got to be careful with that statement, because you are in that, you raise me up Josh Groban style right now when it comes to how you talk about your young quarterback and your young offense and what you expect from them.
Yeah, I think, and the worry is always what it's going to do when it goes, because I think in its intent, he was basically offering them some grace, saying, hey, listen, I understand these guys are still growing into what they're going to be, and so we've got to be better as the defense, but it doesn't necessarily sound that way off first rip there, and especially at a time where so far in the season, Jordan Love, you mentioned the growing pains. Only one game where he has completed over 60% of his passes. Only one game with over 250 passing yards. In the last 3 games, he's thrown 2 touchdowns against 6 interceptions, including multiple last night. So it's not been an easy stretch. He's not been a great deep ball thrower in this time, although Christian Watson was injured for a lot of the beginning portion of the season. There's a lot of reasons, including the volatility up front with injuries on the offensive line, that aren't going to play well long term. But speaking of playing well long term, a win in Red River goes a long way. Let's see how the Sooners are faring in college football next. All right, pumped to welcome in Eric Byrnes, former major leaguer, current ML. All right, welcome back to GoJo and Golic, Mike Golic Jr., Jason Fitz, Jesse Cofield, and guys, before we get to college football, Jesse did us all the kindness this morning of being a good teammate and reminding us where we're at right now. Friends, brothers and sisters in Christ out there, people listening right now live on the DraftKings YouTube channel, DraftKingsNetwork.com, Samsung TV Plus, any of the other places that we're on now. Welcome. Hi, new friends who are checking us out maybe for the first time. Let us know. The only show that's going to remind you, maybe buy a Powerball ticket today.
Yeah.
$1.55 billion.
It is the second largest Powerball that we've had. So buy a ticket, and if you win, perhaps you feel indebted to your friends who reminded you to buy a ticket. And, you can reach out. We'll take a little finder's fee.
Right. You know what? Maybe you come on, you sponsor the show, and it's just a big old picture of you for a bunch of money that's just for you now. It's like a Ricky Bobby scene where who's he putting on the car? Oh, I'm going for me. And he's like, who the hell's me? And no, me is you. That can be you when you win Powerball, or it can be me, who I promise you'll never see again if I win Powerball. I remember, guys, I was in the offseason program with the Saints in 2014, and there was a big Powerball number. And every Wednesday, I would go and buy Powerball tickets on the way to the offseason program, and I would walk into the locker room, and I would go and sit down with the rest of the O-line. I said, take a good look, boys. This is the last day you're ever going to see me, because the minute I get this winning number, I'm driving right to the Louisiana State Lottery office, and then I am disappearing off the face of the earth.
Mike, this is all your fault now, but I have to tell you two things. One, if I win the Powerball, and I don't usually play, but I'm going to run and not walk. I'm going to run with my tiny steps, and I'm going to figure out how to buy as many tickets as possible. If I win, the opposite. You're going to hear from me every day. And the answer to everybody that asks me for money is squarely no, right? But you're going to hear from me every day. And then the most important thing is you've just now planted the seed. I'm going to buy this show. And when I buy this show as the title sponsor, you're going to put my fat head right behind you, and you're going to have to, it's going to be presented by My God, I Love Jason Fitz. And that's going to be the name of the company, My God, I Love Jason Fitz. And you're going to have to say that at least 6 times an hour, every hour, because I'm going to buy this show. So I just want you to know that I'm not going to stop working. I'm not going to stop hanging out on Fox Sports and Yahoo Sports because I love what I do. I'm going to be dirty rich doing it, and I'm going to own your show.
But then everybody's going to know that you won. See, the key to winning Powerball is you have a lawyer collect under an LLC, whatever. You don't want people to know that you won Powerball.
No, I don't care
100%.
if people know. Like, that's why I have a flat out say no to everything rule. Like, what I would do is I will take part of it and I will set up a foundation. And when people inevitably come in, and because everybody does in these situations, and say, I need help with this and this and this, I will say, reach out to my foundation, who I will hire somebody graceful and kind to say no to everybody. And then they can handle the foundation portion of it and decide, who not to say no to. And then I will just live like a very loud, eccentric, rich person for the rest of my life. Like, I will be that billionaire that's on every sideline all the time. And like, I might get shirts made that said, hi, my name's Fitz. I'm worth $1.3 billion, whatever it is. I just so we're clear, like, I want the world to know that I won the Powerball. I want Mike to have to say my name 6 times an hour. And I want to say no to everybody.
I'm looking forward to Jason Fitz being robbed on every street that he walks on wearing that dumbass shirt.
But you know as well as anybody, Mike, they'll have to kidnap me because I'm still cheap and I'm not going to actually carry cash anywhere.
Duh.
Yeah, Fitz wouldn't pay his own ransom if he was kidnapped in this situation. So we're going to all make great rich people. I know that. Fitz, college football this weekend had a lot of really interesting results. I'm curious for you, which one stood out the most for you this weekend of what we saw and who ended up either winning or losing? I'll give you free reign on this.
So look, this might sound cliche to some people, but I think I've been waiting all year for Georgia to put 4 quarters together. And the fact that Georgia, a week after Auburn ran the ball pretty well against them, and then coming in a week after we saw, who I've now nicknamed Sweet Baby Ray Davis, go off for Kentucky, I really thought, hey, there might be a method to the madness. Maybe this is the moment that Kentucky shows they can run the ball. Maybe this is another moment of weakness for Georgia. Instead, it's almost like Georgia just finally was like, okay, we'll give a damn for 4 quarters and show what we're capable of. And it's the number one moment we've waited for from the number one team in the country. So I think Georgia playing to the level that they played for 4 quarters against a Kentucky team that's actually pretty good showed something to me for the first time this year.
Yeah, I completely agree. I was down in Athens on the call for this game for Learfield, and it was startling to see in person how big, strong, athletic, and then competent this team looked, right? Because they had slow starts in SEC play. They had been behind in the second half of the game, or they'd been behind going into the fourth quarter against Auburn. They had been behind at halftime against South Carolina. They'd been playing with their food a lot. And then this game, they came out and they ate early and often. It seems like now there's a decided step between Georgia, Michigan, and then everybody else, I think, from 3 and 4 on. Like, the gap between Michigan and Georgia, to me, is smaller than the gap between Michigan and then whoever you want to put in the 3 and 4 spot after that. Because Fitz, looking around at the rest of college football, like, I think in that conversation now, as we've had this round robin of teams trying to play for that back half of the playoff spots here, Oklahoma, the Red River Rivalry, that was probably the other biggest admission of the weekend, because it was really the first team they played where we looked up and said, okay, now we can measure the value off this. And Texas spotted them some points early on, man. Quinn Ewers was careless with the football, but I think most people came away from that game with Oklahoma is now playing a physical brand of football on both lines of scrimmage under Brent Venables, and Dylan Gabriel, who was absent in this game last year, came back and was the difference, especially with his legs. It wasn't a particularly explosive ground game outside of what he was able to do both as a scrambler and with some designed runs in a way that has them, I'd say at worst right now, probably the 4th best team in the country based off what we thought of, and quite honestly still think of Texas in a game that we're going to get a rematch of in the Big 12 championship game this year.
And frankly, that's why I was surprised Texas fell so far in the AP poll from this loss. Like, this is the Red River Rivalry, right? And, I was actually sitting with a bunch of buddies that were watching it and half the room that was watching it was chanting Bert's name as Bert Auburn kicked what looked like was the winning field goal. The only thing better than Bert's hair was that kick, right? Like, so all of a sudden you think Texas has it. It's amazing what 1 minute in a college football game does for the entire playoff picture, because with a minute and a half to go, this thing is like, oh, look, Texas is going to win it. And to your point, they didn't play particularly well at times and still looked like they had this game won. I thought this was going to be a statement moment for Texas, who would then have the resume to really say, hey, we deserve to be a better consideration for even number one, considering who we played. Maybe they're not better than Georgia by the eye test, but who they played should matter at some point. And that all fell apart. So I'm trying to figure out what that rematch looks like, because frankly, when they get that game and it's not the Red River Rivalry and you don't have that home advantage, you don't have all of that with it. Like, I think Texas is not out of this conversation by any stretch of the imagination as well as they played. But to your point also, Oklahoma did show this level of physical football that you anticipated when we talked over the summer. You kept saying, hey, don't sleep on Oklahoma. Like, Oklahoma is going to be a physical football team this year. They showed that. It's a weird year because we're going to see somebody slip up. And right now, for all the years you and I have been covering college football, I don't remember the last time we ever got this far into the season and genuinely had no idea who the 4 playoff teams are.
Yeah, and we're still, I think, because we're getting into conference play, sorting through exactly what we believe every team's capable on the top end, because you look at so many of the top teams, they've been great at blowing out inferior competition. You had a couple of the out-of-conference matchups that felt like they gave us a measuring stick, right? Florida State especially out of conference early, but then, all right, you've got LSU who's kind of slipped up since, and the defense hasn't looked quite like what we expected. They're giving up a bunch of points, so we're going, what does that win actually cost you or actually count for on the top end of this? If you're a Florida State team that then followed that up, laying the egg against BC, could have and should have lost against Clemson, but still going out here and leading the ACC, all these things now are going to get answered, especially in the Pac-12. I'm so excited. I'm going to be on the call for Washington and Oregon this weekend. That is going to be one of those games that starts to stretch where Fitz, we at least get answers with all this stuff, right? In the ACC, you're going to get coming up a bunch of these teams playing, Clemson and North Carolina, Florida, like all these teams going out and actually having to do it against each other, to me, is going to make this a lot easier for us.
And you're on the call for the game this weekend that is right now at this point the most substantial game we've seen this season, right? Like, I believe that Washington, Oregon is substantial for a couple of reasons, not only because both teams are great, but because both teams are far more balanced than people give Pac-12 football for being, right? Like, both teams can play really solid physical defense. We all know that. Oregon especially is just like, they absolutely, they can hit you from anywhere. It's really interesting to see how both of these teams are going to match up against the respective quarterbacks they're facing. Like, Michael Penix Jr. is not the guy he was at Indiana. He's a much different quarterback now at Washington. And I think Washington deserves a lot more conversation in the national championship conversation right now. whoever wins this game gets such a huge statement resume win. This becomes the thing that can pole vault either of those teams into the top 4. This is absolutely a prove-it game that the playoff committee is going to use the rest of the year.
All right, welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Jason Fitz, and Jesse Cofield. And we're excited now to be joined fresh off a big-time performance. I'd say one of the marquee performances of the weekend as the Colts beat the Titans this weekend. Colts running back Zack Moss, kind enough to join us now after 165 yards and 2 touchdowns. Zack, how we feeling this morning, man?
I'm feeling well, man. Feeling well. Appreciate you guys having me on.
No, thanks for joining us here. So take us through that, man. You know, the focus coming into so much of last week for your guys' team in the running back room was around Jonathan Taylor. He's returning to play. He's getting ready to come back. The contract gets announced on Saturday. And yet we get to Sunday and all of a sudden your number gets called and you answer in a big way. What was that performance like for you?
Yeah, I think it was a big performance for myself personally. Obviously the offensive line did a great job at allowing me to, go out there and have a chance to even do that. We knew we needed to win that game. It was a big game for us, divisional game. We hadn't beat those guys in a while, and we hadn't won a home game in a while. So it was like a perfect storm of all these different things combined. And everybody just had the same mindset of, going out there, being physical, being dominant. We was able to walk away with a win.
Given all the change around the organization this offseason, Zack, I think it's fair to say people didn't have the highest expectations for the Colts this year. You guys sit at 3-2 and frankly, one overtime game against the Rams from being 4-1. What did we all miss about Indy coming into this season?
Even when I got here last year, when I, got traded from Buffalo over here, when I came in the middle of the year, I could see the talent that was on the team, right on the offensive side of the ball, and especially on the defensive side of the ball. Now with Coach Shane and, his staff and all the guys he's brought in and all the new players we've got and all that type of stuff, everybody just bought into that same process, same belief. And Coach Shane has done a great job of just, getting all of us to believe in, his message and everything like that. And when you are able to do that, I think as a coach, especially when you have a younger team, one of the younger teams in the league, right? When you're able to do that, and we have the talent we can do a lot of special things. So, we definitely always believed inside our locker room. And that's all that was, mattered to us at that moment.
You mentioned Shane Steichen, who comes over from Philadelphia after their Super Bowl appearance last year. How did he get you guys to buy in so early? What was his message when he walked into the building? We didn't hear as much on the outside as we did from his counterpart in Jonathan Gannon, who had the pew, pew, pew and asking his players if they took the bus to training camp or whatever. What was Shane like on the way in for you guys as the head coach here?
It was to me, it was more of like in a militant style, right? It was no BS. It wasn't going to be any, I'm trying to get to know you over and over and over, right? To, win you over and all that type of stuff. It was, let's get to work, right? Obviously, he knew what team we had and the pieces we had and what we can do in our division. So, he was ready to get to work, and that was the same mindset for a lot of guys, right? When you're losing, obviously when I was in Buffalo, I wasn't doing too much losing with over there, but for a lot of these guys, when we were doing a lot of that losing in the year, that wasn't sitting well with them. They weren't accustomed to that. You're talking about a team who'd been to the playoffs and all that type of stuff. So it was just a perfect storm. Like I said, he came in with the right mindset, and these guys already had the mindset that we wanted to go to work right away. We knew what we could do, and right now we're in the middle of that. It's a long road still ahead. We only played 5 games, so it's still a lot of work to do, but, I think we're doing some good things, and hopefully we continue to do that.
I mean, it's funny to me because we spend so much time talking about Anthony Richardson because what he means to the NFL, young quarterbacks. That's what we do, right? But I want to give some flowers here to Gardner Minshew, who has stepped in repeatedly for you guys. And you couldn't have 2 quarterbacks physically that look much different. Like Anthony Richardson, huge, Gardner not. Like for the offense, how have you guys been able to adjust to whichever quarterback is behind center?
Yeah, I think, even going back to OTAs, when Gardner and AR were, splitting time, guys got a feel for what, Gardner liked to do, what style he was going to try to, come in there with. And then obviously the same thing with AR. And I think, pushing that to now, Gardner's a pro. I've said it multiple times now. He's a pro. He's a consummate pro. He prepares like a starter. He prepares like he's going to be the guy that's going to be in there from quarter 1 to the clock run zeros. So, that's a testament to how hard he works, how he prepares and all that type of stuff. And, we believe in him. We see the work that he does. We see the preparation that goes into it every week. So it's not like we're like, oh man, Gardner's in and we don't believe, right? It's okay, Gardner's in. Let's keep cooking. Let's keep doing what we need to do to go out here and get a win, because we know he's capable of helping us, secure W's.
For Anthony Richardson, what stood out to him early on here in his NFL career? Comes in with a lot of promise and ability. Obviously been dealing with some injuries early on in this season, but what have you liked about your young quarterback?
It's poise. I think it's poise. I mean, I think we were down 23-0 to the Rams, something like that. We were down a lot of points to the Rams at home, and he was able to help us. He literally engineered a 23-point comeback, right, that we ended up losing in overtime. We didn't get a shot in overtime. But, to see that as a rookie quarterback, to do that and not be wavered, not really be fazed by anything, right, and continue to keep going out there fighting, we love to see that in him. And we already knew what we was getting in him. I mean, the poise, and only being 21 years old, right, he has so much growth still to go. He hasn't really played a lot of football when you accumulate his college days and all that type of stuff as well. So he's definitely, trending in the right direction. I'm happy I'm able to see a guy like him continue to get better every day. And, it's definitely a blessing to, be able to line up beside him.
An incredible backfield mate there, as is your other running back field mate in Jonathan Taylor, who gets a payday this weekend, has gone through this offseason saga. I'm curious for you, Zack, as his teammate, as a guy in that running back room and a running back in general in the league. What was your feeling? What was your reaction to seeing everything he went through finally end with him getting a payday and a long-term contract with this team?
Yeah, I mean, I think, when you think about it as just being a running back in the league, right, it sucked to see him have to go through all the different loopholes that he had to go through to get this contract. knowing that he's well-deserved of it. And I don't think anyone didn't think he was well-deserved of it. That's just how sometimes the business shakes out, right? You got to be able to separate your feelings from certain things and of that nature and continue to do what you need to do. But, I was super happy for him when he got it because, everyone knows the type of talent this dude is, man. I mean, like I remember, in college, turning on the TV and like watching, him go crazy over there in Wisconsin. And to see him be able to do the same thing in Indy, even times when we played him in Buffalo. So I was just super happy for him. He deserved it, many times over. Besides being a great football player, he has a high character. People love him. I've never heard anyone say anything negative about him. And I definitely haven't even seen anything negative about the guy since I've been his teammate. It was big for our room. It's big for our team. It's big for the community. And, everybody's excited to have him back.
Did you tell him to slide a little bit of that money your way, considering you went out there and balled out this weekend and kind of carried the running back room? I know he's coming back from injury, but you say, hey, maybe you slide a little bit of that my way after this, right?
No, I just being a good teammate.
There we go. The consummate pro himself, Zack Moss, coming off a huge weekend for the Indianapolis Colts. Zack, we appreciate you giving us some time this morning, man. Best of luck. Stay healthy. And hopefully you guys can continue what's been a really fun run to start this season.
Absolutely. Appreciate you guys having me on. Take care.
Thanks, Zack.
No problem.
Hey, man, it's like you said, overall, obviously, it's twofold, right, for him, Jason. It's his teammate. It's a guy that he sees every day up close and personal and has worked with going back to last year that went through that saga. But as a running back, I'm sure there's kind of a sigh of relief to see, all right, it's not so far gone to where if I perform at a high level, I'm not going to see that benefit from that financially for putting my body on the line.
Yeah, and he's also a running back, by the way, that's playing really well. So Zack Moss is at the same time using his reps to play himself into that payday for him. Maybe not that payday, but a massive payday somewhere.
Yeah, remember, he was a guy that was injured in the preseason, broken arm or whatever he had going into the year, to now come back and be doing this is pretty damn impressive, to say the least, for Zack Moss. Former Utah running back, by the way, too. It's like totally out of the equation there. Coming up next, though, we'll try and figure out more of the math problems around college football here on GoJo and Golic.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. I'm Jesse Cofield. Let's take a look at the AP Top 25. There's been some notable movement after the weekend in college football. One team that didn't move, Georgia, they're staying at number 1. So the Bulldogs got 50 first place votes. They only got 35 last week. So Georgia, the consummate number 1 here. Number 3, Ohio State. Number 4, Florida State. Each moving up a spot. Each received a first place vote. Oklahoma jumped 7 spots to number 5 after beating Texas on Saturday in the Red River Rivalry. And Louisville jumped 11 spots to number 14 after taking down Notre Dame. Sorry, GoJo.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, listen, deservedly so. What Jeff Brom has done going back, the prodigal son returning home after going and doing what he needed to do at Purdue and a couple other spots. Nothing short of exemplary. Build the statue now for that guy, one of Louisville's beloved sons that comes back and makes my life a living hell in there. Fitz, I'm curious for you, 30,000-foot view of this, because the Notre Dame situation, while I always do my best to put on the analyst hat, there's going to be a part of me that is obviously tied to that school in a way that maybe puts the blinders on. So from the national perspective for you, as you look at Notre Dame in this juncture, what is your read on this team? What is your read on the current state of this program?
They're okay. And like the hard part about that is you and I talked early in the season, and just as you said earlier, you might be the president of the Dan Campbell Street team. I might have said that for you. I felt like that was me for Sam Hartman this year coming into it. And like I did everything short of getting a tramp stamp that said Hartman on the back of it. Like I feel like for me, I expected this big revolutionary Sam Hartman moment. And we've seen it at times. We've seen moments of it, but it feels like everything I thought Notre Dame would do easily, which is spread the ball around. And because you had to be able to defend him spreading the ball around, it would create better running opportunities and they'd be able to really come in and just ram the ball down your throats. I had national championship type aspirations for Notre Dame from the outside looking in. The Notre Dame loss to Ohio State, I really, in a lot of ways, forgave. Like that moment's going to happen in college football. For me, struggling the way they did against a good Duke team, but not a great Duke team the week after, I was almost like, all right, well, you got to shake that off. Like you're still coming off the emotional. When you see it 3 times in a row, though, now you're looking at it and saying, okay, this is definition of insanity. I was surprised that Louisville did what they did to Notre Dame. I'm surprised that Louisville got as much of a push in the AP Top 25 because I think that's as much a statement that maybe Notre Dame's just not as good as we thought Notre Dame was 2 weeks ago as anything. Louisville gets a very impressive win, but at the same time, I'm just looking at Notre Dame saying, man, you are exactly what we didn't think Notre Dame would be this year, which is a 2 or 3 loss team that just sort of sits in the middle of the pack and is pretty good, but not great. And that's not aligning with what the expectations were for the Irish this year.
Well, you're right, because the Sam Hartman portion of those expectations is what makes it feel incredibly dire, because you only got him for 1 year. It's a 1-year loaner of one of the better veteran quarterbacks college football's seen in quite some time. And I think you actually brought up an interesting point, and this is something I hadn't thought about in this way of, I think where Notre Dame's identity is right now, especially on offense. Defensively, it's pretty consistent with whom they've been. That's a really good defensive unit that you just cannot have on the field as long as they were on the field against Louisville, with the turnovers on offense and with the difficulty that unit had converting in short yardage situations. But offensively, in their identity is, this was a team, to your point, some people might have thought, could pass to set up the run better now with Sam Hartman. But with Notre Dame's receiver core being banged up and young and not having a guy that's top end speed wise going to open things up, you've still got to be a run to set up the pass outfit. And I think the last couple of games, Duke was a tougher test because up front they sort of met Notre Dame where they were and really gave them some trouble there. But going back to against Ohio State, going back to against NC State, Notre Dame had still been hey, we're going to run to set up the pass. We're going to make sure we're pounding them inside to get guys open. And I think, Fitz, if there's going to be a fix, one, it's going to come this week, because that USC defense isn't stopping anybody. Schematically, personnel-wise there, if Notre Dame's offense cannot get right this week against this USC defense, then there are much more serious problems than I see right now for a Notre Dame offense that, to me, if they can just flip that switch back to the team they were a few weeks ago, it was like I said, someone bumps their head in a movie and gets amnesia for a little bit. Notre Dame's got to remember, we can line up with multiple running backs, hand it off downhill to Audric Estime and beat people up in the middle of this, and then use that to try and make life a little bit easier for everyone in the receiving core. All of a sudden, I don't think that this thing spirals the way it could could, but it all comes down to this week. This has to be the ultimate get-right game, especially for that offense, who's got to do what they can to keep the timing strange for Caleb Williams and that USC offense on the other side that's just waiting to make your life a living hell no matter how they looked against Arizona.
I'm going to give you a big statement here, but I think we get it this weekend. If USC goes out and just absolutely beats the snot out of Notre Dame, like talking double-digit win, 10-point win or more, right? Then it is living, breathing proof the defense no longer wins championships in college football. Because the greatest question that you have right now is, no matter how good you are defensively in today's world, can you score 30-plus points? Because it feels like if you can't consistently find a way to get to 30-plus points, you ain't going to win a lot in college football. And USC's been, hey, we're just going to play video game football. We won't worry about it. It's like Big 12 defense from 10 years ago. We're not even trying, right? But they still win football games. Every time they win, they fall in the rankings, and people just can't accept the fact that a defense that looks this bad can continue to win games. But if they do that very thing against Notre Dame, then what you're really proving to the world is you can have a great defense, but if your offense can't come up with 3 or 4 big touchdowns a game, you can't be competitive at a national championship level, which changes the way everybody has to think about what they're doing stylistically moving forward.
Especially, it's a great point for USC as we talk about some of the existential dread on Notre Dame's side of things. For USC, you've got a guy who has a legitimate chance to be the first 2-time Heisman Trophy winner we've seen since Archie Griffin, and yet your defense that you went out and put guys from the transfer portal into all offseason does not appear to be improved at all. Now, all of a sudden, it does ask questions about the blueprint going forward, because if that quarterback can't be enough offensively to lift you over the top, I get Lincoln just rolls through with these guys like it's nothing. He's got Heisman Trophy winners in his resume. He's going to have more good quarterbacks there. But for that formula to work long term with Alex Grinch as your defensive coordinator, going to be some real questions this year in what is a crowded and competitive Pac-12 field. But overall, one of the more crowded college football playoff fields we've seen in some time. I agree completely, Fitz. You talked about the hangover from certain events. I'm curious what you feel like the hangover is going to be for Miami after this Mario Cristobal decision against Georgia Tech. I know you were doing having a conversation about some of the all-time coaching blunders, looking into some of the biggest we've seen. Where did that fall for you? Mario Cristobal refusing to kneel it out with 33 seconds left and the win in hand against Georgia Tech.
That's number one. And look, when you start looking at the game, it's not as impactful as deciding to throw the ball on the goal line in a Super Bowl. I get that. It's not as impactful as the kick 6 because of a rivalry. But when you look at what's in front of you and just the very basic, all we have to do is take a knee. Like there are a couple of things that immediately pop to me, and you know this from being in locker rooms better than I ever will. But when you've got a now very famous GIF of a player looking over saying, "What the F are we doing?" Right? Like that everybody's watching. That to me speaks to you lose your locker room in moments like that. Like everybody looking around is now looking squarely at the coach and saying, "That's on you." And he can own it all day long. He can stand up at the podium and say, "I got to do better." That doesn't explain why you didn't realize that when you made the call. Like it's a victory formation exists for a reason. To have your coach not use victory formation, now everybody standing on the sidelines that wears the jersey is saying, the hell are we doing, right? Like everybody that's sitting there as part of the program is saying, what is this guy thinking? And that's the sort of seed that gets planted. That just, it takes away a whole season of good feels for Miami right now. Like they were a good feel story and a good football team. And now you just sit there and this just sits. It sits. And I think this lingers for them.
Yeah, this is going to have a bad taste in people's mouth for a long time, because I literally said last week, Miami is undefeated and no one seems to be talking about them. They had a win over, at that time, a ranked Texas A&M team coming in as a non-conference resume point, and no one was talking about them. And now everyone's talking about them for all the wrong reasons, and it ratchets up the intensity around a team that's getting ready to go through the toughest stretch of its season with North Carolina and Clemson in back-to-back weeks. Fitz, to the point about losing the locker room, I think that's only true if you don't get up and totally and completely own this. Yes, it's a blunder, but everyone who's a part of a team is going to make a serious blunder at some point. It might not get this level of national scrutiny, but you're going to step in it. It's, hey, did he stand in front of that locker room and that team meeting room the next day and say, guys, that's 100% on me. You did enough in that game to go out and get the win, and I didn't hold up my end of the bargain. That goes a long way. Will remain to be seen what that looks like for them. But coming up next, it's time for a Wilder Wednesday here on GoJo and Golic. Charlotte Wilder joins. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Jesse Cofield, Jason Fitz. And guys, it is a Wednesday. Well, no, it's not a Wednesday. Wow. You know what? The thing happened to me that I always worry about happening to people. So working in sports talk radio for a long time, one of the things that would happen, and Fitz knows this very well, is at times around certain events, they would put us on for a longer show or a shorter show. And at times in the morning, I was working 4 to 6 a.m. for a while on ESPN radio. And there were sometimes after a big event late night, they would actually have us go on from 3 to 6. And they would have us go in even earlier to do that. And I would always have to remind people or warn people, hey, if you're hearing my voice right now, don't panic. You're not late on your alarm. I'm just early on the show. You're not missing the appointment you're supposed to be at. We're here a little bit earlier because at this point there's a rhythm and a cadence to things that people get used to when they've got certain things they expect at certain times. And so in my, infinite, whatever the lack of wisdom is, idiocy, I hear and see Charlotte Wilder, our dear friend and the co-host of Oddball with Amin El Hassan on the DraftKings Network, and I immediately thought Wednesday, even though it is in fact now a Wilder Tuesday. So Charlotte, how you doing, bud? Sorry for that really convoluted intro.
No, I'm so sorry to everybody who now thinks it's Wednesday because it's not. Still Tuesday, and you have, I was about to say 4 more days, but I guess it's 3 more. Math has never been my strong suit. I'm just so happy to be here with you guys. Jason, Jesse, Mike, just always a pleasure.
We all know it's Tuesday because Monday Night Football was last night. We all know that because the Raiders won. So I don't know how you guys could possibly get your days. I'm sorry. I hadn't brought it up in a few minutes. So it doesn't happen often. Let me have my moment.
Well, we've got 2 opposite ends of the spectrum right now, really, which is why I'm concerned, because we've got Jason rolling in here as hot as ever. The guy's drunk on Vegas bombs last night. He smells like booze even through the Zoom chat this morning.
Fair.
And then Charlotte Wilder and her New England Patriots are going through, I would say, the biggest crisis of their modern life, and a team that's dealt with scandal and a number of things around a program that was ultimately very good at football. Charlotte, now you guys are very not good at football, and I have been amazed at how quickly the people around New England have turned on Bill Belichick.
Well, first of all, the scandals were fun when we were winning, and the scandals were fun when the Patriots were winning, and it could be like, it's us against the world. You guys just don't understand. If you're not cheating, you're not trying, like whatever. It's less fun when your team isn't cheating, they're just bad. Like, maybe we should try cheating. Should we try that?
Yeah,
would that help?
That could turn things around a little. Cheating.
That is true. The Patriots need to show us that they actually care again by trying to do something nefarious to gain an advantage that they clearly need on offense at this point.
Sorry, Jason, please talk.
I just think it should be pointed out, if you can win the way y'all won for generations and cheat while you're doing it, I don't care. Like, look, everybody can take the moral high ground and say, oh, it's so wrong. They're cheaters. But you know damn well that if I could watch the Raiders win a bunch of Super Bowls, I don't care who we cheat in the process. I don't care how much we lie in the process. I don't care how you can talk about your asterisks all day long. I don't care. If it gets me a handful of Super Bowls, cheat, and more cheat. I don't care.
It was so fun. It was so fun to be that good for that long. It started to feel like, I think I'm in the minority here among Patriots fans, but I started to feel like sort of bad about it. I started to feel a little grimy, be like, oh my God, we're going to the Super Bowl again. Like, sorry. It felt gluttonous.
You felt like you were ruining other people's fun by having so much of it yourself. It felt gluttonous.
Yeah, but now I'm like, oh, I shouldn't have felt bad at all because through the bad, like through feeling like, oh, I don't know, this feels like we're having too much of a good thing. But it was so fun. Like, it was exhilarating to have a team where stepped onto the field and you were like, I don't care if we're literally down 28, 25 points. Like, this is in the bag. And it was. And I think now it's sort of fascinating. Like, I really can't fully understand, except that they just have nobody. There's nobody there. The people they did have, I mean, talk about the offense, talk about the defense. Matthew Judon's hurt now. Christian Gonzalez. Like, when both of those guys went down last game, I was like, why would I even tune in to next week? Like, it's so abysmal that it is very strange too, because even when you're a fan of a bad team, especially one that has been good, you're sort of like, okay, well, we could turn it around. We could still turn it around. And I was thinking that through week 2, week 3, and then week 4, you start to be like, ugh. And after last week, I'm just like, this was not fun. I did not enjoy watching that at all.
Yeah, let me chime in and help you here, Charlotte, because
thank you, Jason.
As a fan of the Raiders, 2 things. Number one, I just learned where I thought there would be nothing worse in the world than like a sympathy second date. You know, she's not really into you, but you were nice enough that she feels like you should go on a second date like that. I thought that was the worst.
Experience there. Huh?
A sympathy Super Bowl like that hits different. Like I feel so bad, but yeah, we're going back to the Super Bowl, but I can help you through this because I know what it's like to watch a team suck for years and still be a fan. So like you gotta realize that what you're looking for, much like a relationship, you're looking for one thread of a reason you can stay together, and then you over obsess over that one thread of a reason. You're like, you know what? Here's the thing, like. I really like this one player, and you can invest in that and convince yourself that one player who's really like a third string tight end is the guy that you're going to build around for the future. You get overly excited about that player for the whole year, even if your team's losing. You're like, 4 catches for the third string tight end. I'm telling you, we got something to, like, you find one fabric of one thread that you can hold on to, and every week you make that the thing that motivates you to watch the game. I've done it for years. I remember so distinctly when the Raiders lost the Super Bowl. I looked at my buddy because they'd lost in weird ways for years leading up to that in the playoffs and the Tuck rule and the Ravens Siragusa hit. I'd seen all of these weird moments. And I looked at my buddy after the Super Bowl and I said, you know what? I'd rather not even watch a playoff game. I'd rather not even make the playoffs than sit here and get my heart broken this way. The Raiders then went on to lose double-digit games for 13 straight years. So, like, you just got to learn to embrace mediocrity. Yeah, 100%. It's all my fault.
I mean, Fitz, on the other side of that hell you spoke into existence for yourself, do you realize how dumb you sounded? Do you realize what a bad idea it was to say that?
Yes, like at this point, I don't care if it's a losing team. I don't care if the Raiders win 6 games. If they somehow get a wild card spot, I'm throwing a party. We're going. Like this is it.
Yeah, I mean, it's like being a sports fan is not like fun. It's not. I think I said this last week. Like I had a very, very, very unrealistic experience as a New England Patriots fan, and now I'm like, oh, this is what it's really like. Because you'll see misery, or I would see misery from NFL fans, and I'd be like, oh, sounds like it sucks, but like actually pretty fun. And now I'm like, oh my God, like even the thing you're talking about, Fitz, being like, pick that one player. That player for me was Christian Gonzalez. When they drafted him, I was psyched. And then watching him play these past few weeks, I was like, you know what, even if the team sucks, like really fun to watch this guy. Like this guy's great. And now that guy's not even there. So it feels like, and I think the whole, I don't know, the whole Belichick of it all is such a stupid argument, really, when you come down to it, because like, sure, since Brady left, they're 26-30, but Belichick gave Brady his defenses. Like the whole thing is such a stupid thing to talk about in terms of like, who was it? It's like, it was both of them. Tom Brady's not playing football anymore now. Belichick is still coaching. I still think what I said last week about when I talked to Mina, our good friend Mina Kimes, and she was like, Belichick, the coach, is one thing. It's Belichick, the GM, who seems to be the problem. But I'm so sick of the like, who was it and where do you give credit, because football is such a team sport. And for a while for 20 years, Belichick did make it work with players that, were not maybe the highest draft picks. And so now it's not working the same way it used to. I don't know. I think
Charlotte, to your point there, I saw Bomani Jones tweeting about this yesterday. It's erasure of the beginning of that Patriots dynasty when Tom took over and was not yet Tom Brady. And you had all of the names on the defensive side of the ball that were the bolster for that team, the backbone for that team, and the reason they were winning early on that set the foundation for all of this. And then you still had someone that created the surroundings there. I think one of the most interesting things about considering the Belichick portion of this, Fitz, is do we believe he's got the capacity to change? Again, I heard Dominique Foxworth and Kevin Clark talk about this yesterday, and I want to bring this to you guys because one of the things they pointed out about Bill Belichick is, much like his counterpart Nick Saban in college, they've been able to change. They've always found ways to morph this team around Tom Brady and around the resources they had at the time to be successful in that current landscape, in that current environment. But now without Brady, you've got to change so drastically your thought process of how to do things. Like, do you guys think that he's capable of that at this stage in the game, or even wants to at this stage of the game, where he's gotten to operate one way for so long because of what he had in the building there, this specific cocktail of him, Brady, and Kraft that allows you to basically operate the way they did under that umbrella for the rest of time here? Does he have that ability to change right now, and should he be given the opportunity to do so? I think yes, but I'm curious what you guys think.
Look, I think part of this question, to your point, Mike, isn't about what anybody's done in the past. It's about looking forward right now for the next 5 years. Can Belichick get you back to where you wanted to be, which would require getting somebody in at quarterback that's the right answer. Like, I don't think the Patriots are living some unique issue here. They're living the issue most fan bases live. You drafted a guy in the first round at quarterback that isn't the answer. He's not good. And so now all of a sudden you can't mask everything else. This is what 90% of football fans have felt at some point in their life. So can Belichick sort of change? Maybe. But is it not also fair to look at the last few years and say that there's been a unique stubbornness to, this is what I do, this is how I do it, I know what I'm doing, I'm the smartest guy in the room? And Mike, you were one of the first people I ever worked with that talked about the fact that we talk a lot about coaching or player egos, I should say. But we don't talk a lot about coaching egos. And I don't think ego is necessarily a bad word here. Like, when you've accomplished what Belichick's accomplished, you walk in and you say, I know what I'm doing. Well, do you? I mean, the roster's bad because of Belichick. The coaching hires have been bad because of Belichick. Like, these are all things that have nothing to do with Coach Belichick. So, has there been any indication leading up to right now that Bill Belichick is currently trying to change? And if the answer, and I don't think the answer to that is yes. So if the answer to that is no, why is this suddenly the awakening? Like, Belichick, the coach, had to look at this and see, hey, there's a chance we might suck this year. Like, he shouldn't be surprised by what Belichick, the GM, and Belichick, the football operations dude, has put into Belichick, the coach's world. So I don't think there's a lot of opportunity to change because there's been no proof of concept that it's going to happen anytime in the last several years, Charlotte.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really funny way of putting it. It's like, how did we get here? And Belichick's looking around. It's like the guy in the hot dog suit being like, we're all trying to find the guy who did this. I think you're right. I think Mac Jones too. I saw Dan Orlovsky saying that he would be great if he were with the Niners. I don't know. I don't think that's necessarily true. I do think that environment determines so much of how a player operates and plays. I also can imagine that being this bad for this long feeds on itself. Like, that's not going to be the confidence boost that Mac Jones needs. I also think that there is a little bit of not laziness, but like lack of fire, the way Belichick talks about all of this. Every game there, people are like, is Mac still the starting quarterback? He's like, yep, still QB1. And it's like, why? It's like, I understand that Bailey Zappi, his numbers might be even worse, but it's like, well, then why didn't you get somebody else? Like, what are we doing? It's mind blowing. And part of me thinks, like, maybe this is a guy who, and this is total speculation, but maybe he's like, you know what? I had a really good run. I'm sort of tired. I don't really feel like revamping everything. Let's ride this out. I don't know.
Yeah, it feels like he's either going to have one last great card to play, or he's going to decide he doesn't want to do this anymore, right? Like, it's either going to be something that looks drastic, or it's going to be a guy who decides, I don't want to have to weather another storm, and this one being the most seismic of any storm he's had in the last 2 decades because of the position that it involves. I actually kind of agree with Dan to a point about Yeah, Mac Jones, given his skill set and what we knew about that player early on in his career before coaching went out here and played a part in screwing him up, going to the healthiest quarterback environment in football inside the Kyle Shanahan offense, probably would have done really well. It doesn't take away from anything that Brock Purdy's doing right now, but it acknowledges what we all know and what you talked about there, Charlotte, which is environment matters. We watched Jacksonville almost destroy Trevor Lawrence with Urban Meyer for a year, and then thankfully came in with the paddles and shocked him back to life, getting Doug Peterson down there. That stuff happens all the time. We talk about it all the time, and yet when it stares us in the face like it is now, Fitz, I mean, look at you guys and Jimmy Garoppolo and the version of him you've got playing for the Raiders versus the version of him we saw in San Francisco. Gee, I wonder what changed. Like, that stuff's not hard to figure out, and yet we try and make it the stinging indictment of anyone who plays quarterback in those offenses as if it means we're calling them a bum. It's not. We're acknowledging the fact that there are other positions and other roles on a football team that matter.
But there are also ways to receive information. Like I at the time, back when I was with ESPN, I hosted some of the digital shows after the Tom Brady series, right? And I'll never forget the first episode when they were talking about Brady at the Super Bowl and his first Super Bowl, and he was super amped up behind the scenes. He was jumping up and down, and I think he said it was Brewski that threw him up against the wall and was like, "Hey, I don't need this version of you. I need like normal Tom," and like talked him down. He then talked in a later episode about how I think it was Willie McGinnis came to him and said, you're partying too hard and you're not living the right way. And the way you're living is going to impact the way I make my livelihood. And Brady took that information and created TB12 so that he could take better care of his body. Like, there are very unique things about Tom Brady in his ability to listen to critique from players that he respected. And also those players that he respected that knew that culture were already in the room to turn around and say, this is how you need to do business. I think if you look at this Mac Jones situation, I don't know who's that dog that's coming to Mac Jones and saying this is how it's going to be done. Who is that person? Is he receiving that information the right way? And also, given the relationship that Belichick has with Nick Saban, shouldn't they been able to talk before this ever happened when you've got two close friends about who Mac Jones is as a quarterback and a human being to receive that information? So, like, all of this that has gone wrong just stacks on top of stacks on tops of stacks.
Well, I think people got I think something that got a little bit muddled was everyone was talking about how high Mac Jones's football IQ was. Everybody was obsessed with the fact that, like, this dude can remember every play. You can put him into an offense and he'll adapt immediately. And I think that that is a crutch for a lot of coaches, for a lot of staff in a building to be like, well, this guy's really smart, so like he'll figure it out. And it takes the onus off of them to be like, yeah, but you know what? He's also a kid. And we need to put this, and this in place for him to thrive. I don't know, maybe not Matt Patricia and Joe Judge, like still like.
And especially not them if you're not going to have any dudes. Like, you don't have any dudes. We do the X's and O's, Jimmys and Joes thing. Like, there aren't a lot of Jimmys and Joes. To Fitz's point about who that person would be to come up with them on defense, there's some, but to Charlotte's point, a lot of them are hurt right now and reeling on a side of the ball that's trying to get their own stuff together. And on offense, there's not anybody. There's nobody coming to save them on offense as the shirts read. And that's part of the problem is Mac Jones, for anything you wanted to say positive about him, wasn't going to be a guy like Mahomes and that group of quarterbacks that can come in and elevate beyond circumstance. That's kind of always the way I look as the defining characteristic of what an elite quarterback is are they better than the sum of the parts? Are they going to be able to do things outside of what the offense asks, even on the best day in that offense? And what personnel are around them, even if they've got good personnel on that offense? Are there things that you can point to and look at and say, that wouldn't happen if it was another guy under center for us there? There are very few of those people that exist, and it's not an indictment of the rest of the quarterbacks around the league for not being that. But it's also, hey, you got to be realistic about who you got. And the Patriots, even if you thought Mac Jones is whip smart and has a great release and has all these positive characteristics that I'm sure Nick and Bill talked about here, he ain't a guy that's going to go out there and make you better than that. He wasn't in Alabama. He didn't have to be at Alabama. And in New England during his rookie season, didn't have to be. But then after that, they felt like unnecessarily complicating the picture for a guy that needs to have a little bit more guidance with that hand.
I'm just saying, though, whatever problems he has in his development with those coaches you mentioned, again, Belichick's fault. I'm just going to keep piling on Belichick's fault.
Well, that part is definitely he's got to wear.
I also think that something hilarious about sports is that if you're good for long enough, when you're bad, people will still talk about you. They've been bad for like 3.5 years now. And we're like, but the Patriots, And that's a testament to a dynasty. So you know what? That's where my hope is gonna come from. At least the Patriots are still being talked about.
Charlotte saying, why are you so obsessed with me? Coming up next, I give you the most perfectly on-brand comparison for this show and the New England Patriots next.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. I'm Jesse Cofield. Week 5 took a toll. Let's get into some injury news and updates. So guys, Justin Jefferson, the Vikings plan to place him on injured reserve due to the hamstring injury that he suffered on Sunday. So that means he's going to miss 4 games, and then they're going to reevaluate him after that period of time, see if he needs more time. Another one to note that we have an update on, Devon Achane, he is expected to miss multiple weeks with the knee injury. He is a candidate for injured reserve, according to sources. So some not great injury news after week 5, guys.
Yeah, brutal news there. Devon Achane, who'd been a rookie sensation so far this season for the Miami Dolphins. I don't want to sound callous because he's been a great player and he's going to continue to be an important player for that team. But for the Miami Dolphins, you have a depth of high-speed talent that makes you more capable than most to absorb that kind of loss with what you're capable of around him still. But guys, for Justin Jefferson, this one stat from Adam Schefter underscores exactly what the Vikings lose on offense with this player. Adam Schefter, ESPN NFL insider, tweeted, "The Vikings play the Bears this week, but they will be without Justin Jefferson. Justin Jefferson, who has 5,396 career receiving yards in 55 NFL games, more than any Chicago Bears player in their 100-year history. The Bears' all-time leading receiver is Johnny Morris with 5,059 receiving yards. So Justin Jefferson, 55 games into his NFL career, has trumped anything that any Bears receiver has done ever, and now will be no longer on the field for that Vikings team. An absolutely seismic loss."
By the way, you're underselling the Devon Achane loss and what it means to my fantasy team, but fine. Justin Jefferson, the craziest part about this is look at the Vikings, what they did this offseason. And I think they sort of told you this offseason that they realized last year they were not as good as their record, right? So they started ripping some of this apart. They signed some new contracts that I think are long-term. I think there's been a point of emphasis on we need to reset at the quarterback position at some point. Justin Jefferson being out for a prolonged amount of time is bad for the Vikings this year, but the Vikings are sneaky a tank candidate to me. Like where they sit right now and where they will sit throughout the course of the year, Kirk Cousins is going to be a quarterback somewhere else. And the Vikings are going to be hoping that they're one of those teams that because of injury and other chaos slips to the point that they can get their next quarterback and reset at that position, but still keep some of the talent around that they need. I think actually internally, they'll never say it out loud, Charlotte, but if I'm the Vikings, I'm okay with this. Like, we weren't going to win the Super Bowl this year anyway, so let's press reset.
Yeah, I mean, maybe continuing with that, they're sort of like, well, okay, Justin will get some rest. We'll keep him healthy. I mean, no, I don't know. That stat is incredible. I interviewed Justin when he was a rookie in I guess it was before the 2021 Super Bowl, and he was just like such a delightful person. Like he was goofy and fun, and I think it's so exciting when you see someone who is so unbelievable on the field, and then that intensity is also paired with a sort of goofiness. That has nothing to do with Kirk Cousins or the future quarterback. I whenever I hear Justin Jefferson, you know how there's some guys that if you work in sports media long enough that you've talked to and you just always sort of root for them. Also, like the Bears, I feel like the Vikings might be able to do this without Justin.
If the Justin Fields from the last couple of weeks in that offense continue to show up, this could be a little bit dicey. It's going to be a nonstop blitzing from Brian Flores on the other side without the threat of that big play. To Fitz's point, they added Jordan Addison in this offseason at the very least, so you've got another competent receiving option there. You paid TJ Hawkinson, all these things that are going to be guys that offset that, but the whole thing doesn't work without Justin Jefferson and what he occupies in the hearts, minds, and game plans of other teams coming in. So that is going to be an interesting now addition to the NFC North picture we talked about from before. Guys, let's get to a few superlatives from this week in the NFL. It's Tuesday. We usually like to do this around here. And starting off with that, guys, let's go for who gets an A for effort from this past week. Looking around, a losing effort around the NFL, but still managed to go out there and perform really well. Adam Thielen was one in a game there for the Carolina Panthers, and a team who struggled passing the ball this year. Jaleel McLaughlin, who had his name spelled wrong on his jersey originally, and then Cooper Kupp or CJ Stroud. Guys, to me, I would probably go with Cooper Kupp and what he meant for this Los Angeles Rams passing attack, coming back off IR and performing as well as he did with over 100 receiving yards in that first game back. In an NFC picture that's a little bit murky, I think that goes a long way in continuing to drive home that this Los Angeles Rams team can absolutely be a playoff team this season if they continue to play this way on offense.
I mean, I like that call, Mike, but also why is it we live in a world? I'm just throwing this out there. Haven't really thought it through, but why do we live in a world where every quarterback that has success in some system, we're like, well, it's just a system. And then like we see receiver after receiver after receiver put up massive yards for the Rams, and we never want to say it's just a system. I think that even you right now could go in and still catch 3 or 4 passes for 22, 23 yards total in that offense. Like if we're giving an A for the effort here, it goes to CJ Stroud, right? Like, because if you look at the way CJ Stroud is playing, not only efficiently, not only throwing the ball downfield, not only not making mistakes, but he did everything he could to bring the Texans to that game and to that win. Obviously, they don't get it because of the last-second kick by Atlanta, but CJ Stroud in a losing effort far exceeds a system wide receiver, just putting up more system wide receiver yards from another system wide receiver. That's my shade to the wide receivers.
Wow. You stole mine, Fitz. I was going to say CJ Stroud. He had 177 straight passing attempts without throwing an interception as a rookie, which is crazy. I also just think it's such a statement on the NFL and how quickly things can change that we're talking about a Texans and a Falcons game as being like, oh my God, like that was an impressive battle. And then at the last minute, the Falcons won. It's like, sorry, what? Like And
How?
yeah, I'm like, yeah, how? But I've loved watching him, and I love the end of that game was so exciting. I think it's also just so lovely for everybody in Houston, where the fans have not had the greatest string of news over the past 5 years, to be like, here's a fresh start. Here's a guy that you can clearly start thinking, wow, this is really our future. So I would also give it to CJ Mike.
All right, we'll go quickly on this one, guys. Going to superlatives at this point in the segment was a bad idea by me, but we're all going to give our favorite history-making moment from the weekend here. Is it the Dolphins offense outpacing everyone in NFL history through 5 games, Christian McCaffrey's consecutive touchdown streak, Patrick Mahomes now officially being the youngest quarterback to ever beat all other 31 teams, or Alvin Kamara, now the franchise leader in touchdowns for the New Orleans Saints here from a running back? Jason, I'll start with you. Most impressive history from the weekend.
Yeah, Mahomes beating all 31 teams, because now I can just continue to say, look, what did you expect? We were taking on Mahomes when I encapsulate this entire era of being a Raiders fan. So, yeah, it's all about Mahomes and his dominance that I have no choice but to acknowledge, Charlotte.
Probably Mahomes, yes, but also McCaffrey, because I'm in a justice for running backs mode this season, and I like seeing what he's doing and being like, pay them all.
You know what? Especially for a show that just had a running back on here who did baller things this week and was in a backfield with Jonathan Taylor, who did get paid. I do like that. And we're a heavily pro-union show here anyway, so we want to make sure that all these guys get paid for being really, really good at what they do. Christian McCaffrey is one of those guys that's deservedly gotten that payday, and now he's balling outrageous. I would probably side with you as well on that, Charlotte, with Christian McCaffrey, what he's done since that trade, especially the background of being hurt as much as he was towards the end of his time in Carolina, nothing short of exemplary.
Yes.
That's
sorry, guys. Someone had the out time wrong in this, so we got a whole nother minute here. We get to vamp right now on that. This has just been a comedy of errors in this segment at this point. So we're just going to ride it all the way to the break here. Charlotte, how's the rest of your week looking?
Oh, you know, pretty good. Amin will be in New York for an oddball in person in the New York studios. So everybody should tune into that. DraftKings every day but Monday at 5:30 Eastern. And that, you know, and my brother-in-law is getting married, so shout out to Connor.
Oh, congratulations.
Oh, let's go. Charlotte Wilder, our show's foremost wife guy, showing up here now, getting to support yet another union.
Thank you. Yeah, it's very pro-union on this show, Mike. What about you guys? How's your guys' week looking?
Very pro-union. Coming up next, we're going to get away from this dumpster fire of a segment and go to a pre-taped interview for you guys.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Let's check in on October baseball and our NLDS series. So the Braves with a 5-4 comeback victory to even the series with the Phillies 1-1, and Braves did what they do best. Homer, 2 late-inning home runs from Travis d'Arnaud and Austin Riley lift Atlanta over Philly, plus a historic game-ending double play. First double play ever involving an outfielder to end a postseason game. Then, of course, we have the Diamondbacks with a 4-2 win over the Dodgers. They're up 2-0 in this series. The third wild card team, D-backs now, have won 4 straight games, have the Dodgers on the brink of elimination. Really exciting stuff here. And yesterday, GoJo and Golic got a chance to talk playoff baseball with former Major League outfielder Eric Byrnes. Take a look.
All right, pumped to welcome in Eric Byrnes, former Major Leaguer, current MLB analyst. Talk some postseason baseball. Eric, how's it been for you so far, man? How have you enjoyed this postseason run?
It's been great. I think you've seen the Diamondbacks and what they're capable of doing. It's my former team, so obviously I'm a little biased in that sense, and it's a team that's so easy to overlook. But they have one of the best young players that I've seen in a long time, in Corbin Carroll. I think the fact that he's 5'0" makes him even that much more entertaining. There's a thing, guys, that we used to reference all the time. It's called tension-free barrel release. And when you watch somebody hit, it's like they're short to it, and then they get here, and then it just goes, and they hit these balls that you think are gonna, maybe they might just like sneak over the fence, and it ends up going 450 feet. That's Corbin Carroll. And he hits these balls. You're like, oh, I think he hit that pretty well, and then it's 440, 450 feet. You're like, dude, how is this little guy doing it? So I mean, this guy's a guy after my heart.
Yeah, I mean, the small hitter is like that wee golfer that can drive at 350 yards, and we have no idea how they do it, yet they are able to do it. I want to ask about the Baltimore Orioles. Had an incredible year, 101 wins, down in this series to Texas 2-0. Are they in a position, while you never take the playoffs for granted, of, hey, we're happy we're here and we got here, we think we can make a run for a while?
Yeah, Mike, you know what? My thing with the Orioles was that they haven't been there before. And you had a manager in Brandon Hyde who has gone through the trenches with this group to finally get to the spot where they've won 100 games, incredible turnaround, great young talent. The Orioles aren't going anywhere. So as long as they can keep a decent staff and a decent bullpen around them, this team's going to be good for a long time. But as we all know, like, going through the postseason is different than the regular season. And so when you have a guy like Bruce Bochy, 3 world championships on the other side with the Texas Rangers, they're going to be up against it. And that was, if you look at the money, that was pretty much a pick'em series. And if you look just straight at the numbers, you're like, man, that shouldn't be a pick'em series. That should be, the Orioles should be winning this. I just had a feeling Texas was gonna figure out a way to get this done.
Houston and Minnesota evened up at 1 game apiece. But overall for Houston, outside of Houston fans, are they still hated for their whole sign stealing, trash can banging situation?
Yeah, I do, Mike. I think so. People won't get over it, but at this point, who cares? If you're them, you put both middle fingers up to the world and say, so what? We're always going to hear this. I don't say always, but that's not going away anytime soon. Now, the irony, though, is that let's just say a guy that allegedly was a big part of the sign stealing scheme is now on the other side with the Minnesota Twins and had a huge hand in defeating the Astros. I'll tell you guys this. So I did a Savannah Banana thing just recently with Josh Reddick. And I was asking Reddick about that 2017 team and the sign stealing and how the whole thing went down. And he told me that, he's like, look, a lot of this is public, but Carlos Beltran's like, guys, like, we're behind the curve on this. And so Beltran, in the way that he came up and was groomed through the system, was like, this is what we do. And it became more advanced and more advanced and more advanced. But he said at first, all they cared about was picking signs, right? And then it was this, wait, hold on a second. We have this feed here. This is too easy. But he said they all realized at once, they're like, dude, this is stupid. Like, they're going to figure this stuff out. Now, he did say that there was one player specifically, and he said there was multiple, but one specifically who has been absolutely battered for this, yet never, ever, ever, ever stole a sign, nor wanted a sign stolen, nor was happy with it. Jose Altuve.
Wow.
How about that? Of all the crap that Altuve's gotten, all of it, 100%. And you boys in the trenches know, right? You're in the dugout, you know who's doing what. And he never stole a sign. So ultimately, yeah, everyone hates the Astros. We know they hate the Astros, but I think there's a lot of people that don't care for Carlos Correa either, and now they're facing off against each other. Bygones be bygones, man. I mean, it's what it is.
You mentioned the banana stuff here. You've had a couple of different roles with this team. Did I see most recently director of chaos? What does a director of chaos do for the Savannah Bananas that have become this cult phenomenon across the country right now?
Well, basically what happened is they reached out to me. Bill Leroy, who's their star catcher, he sends me a message on Instagram. He goes, yo, man, have you ever heard of the Savannah Bananas? No, but that's the greatest name in all of sports. That's fantastic. Tell me more. And so I just learned about them. They were a college summer league team, and they were planning this quote unquote world tour. And because when they played in the college summer league, they couldn't do all the crazy stuff that they do because they're actually playing real baseball, right? So they couldn't play their banana ball rules. They did this one city world tour, and then it went amazing. And they played by these different rules, and then they got to take their dancing exploits to the next level. And in the meantime, they're building up this nice social following. They're like, hey, look, why don't you come out here? Like, we want to get you involved with this. It was like a 14-game world tour, 7 cities. And so on a whim, I went out there and managed the team through that. And I would call it manage, but it's basically director of chaos. And it was awesome. It was one of the better experiences that I've had in my life. If you guys haven't seen it, it's called Banana Land. It was on ESPN Plus. It's worth checking out. It really tells you the whole story of they no longer were a college summer league team, which I know it sucks for, I think it was a Coastal Plains League, but they'd outgrown it. For next year, they just announced that they're going to do a ton more, but the big announcement really was that they're going to play in 6 major league ballparks next year. Wow. And so think about that. Like they were selling out. We sold out everywhere. You're seeing $25 tickets go for $500. I was talking to you guys before we started this. I'm like, it's like Hamilton. It's the only thing I could think of that really, had this kind of markup, but you can't knock it until you tried it. You have to see it in person. You have to feel the vibe. You have to feel the energy. Like it's a party. It's one big party, and it is as entertaining as you ever see. Some of these players are some of the most talented. Not in the sense that they're going to hit a ball 450 feet or they're going to throw 100 miles per hour, but we got a dude, DR Meadows, that you hit a fly ball in center field, he's doing a backflip and catching the freaking ball. Like we have Ryan Cox, who goes in between his legs, the shortstop behind the back. He's as skilled with his hands as any big league shortstop. Now, he doesn't have the physical tools. He's not as fast, not as strong, whatever, but it is awesome to watch. And it's something I'm proud to be a part of. And really, I think now just figuring out, how can I help progress this going forward? How can we scale it? And, ultimately, I'd like to see this become a league. I think that's they just added another team called the Firefighters, so there's now going to be 3 different teams with this, and so I think we'll probably see about 6 teams here in the next couple of years.
From your lips to God's ears,
That's
man.
awesome.
We're big banana disciples over here, big fans of what everyone's done over there. It's an awesome bit of fun injected to all of this, as we've got right now going on in Major League's postseason. Eric, wish we could keep you for even longer, man. Thanks so much for all the passion and energy. We'll have to talk to you again soon, brother.
Absolutely, guys. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Our thanks to Eric Byrnes, who was kind enough to give us some time today. Brought to you by the folks at KT Tape. After his baseball career, he became obsessed with running marathons and ultra marathons and any activity that could really push the human body to the limits. Eric wanted to bring awareness to KT Tape. It's a therapeutic fitness tape that I've actually used plenty of times before. It provides pain relief and support for muscles, tendons, and ligaments. You can check it out at kttape.com. And I can assure you that stuff works. The amount of guys you see with like fake hamstrings that essentially get put on the backside of their legs as supporting your shoulder when you got all that tape spider webbing down there, that stuff will hold you in place. That first time you put it on and you really feel it lock in is pretty dang cool. So thank you to Eric. Thank you to Zack Moss from the Indianapolis Colts, who also joined us. They're a great running back who went off this season. If you missed any of that, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, review, leave us that 5-star rating, and check us out, DraftKings YouTube channel, live here Monday through Friday, so you don't miss it, 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern. Guys, let's get to this, that, and the third. Before we do that, speaking of promoting stuff here, obviously you guys can catch Jason Fitz doing great work over at Yahoo Sports now, covering football for them. So many great interviews that you've seen out there. Also on Fox Sports Radio on the weekends. Charlotte Wilder, Oddball, wherever you get your podcast. Her and Amin El Hassan every day. That's not Monday. Jason, is there anything else that you're doing right now that you want to pub? I know we had you on here for a while when you were in Parts Unknown. You're now doing a ton of things here, so I want to make sure I don't miss anything.
No, you didn't miss anything. We're doing really fun stuff at Yahoo. They're really proud of what we're doing. There are a lot of video content, a lot of quick hit on-demand stuff. Follow me on Twitter. You can find all that there, or X, sorry, and check out the Yahoo Sports app.
You don't have to call it X. You don't ever have to call it X. You don't have to call him dad, not even if there's a fire. He's not your stepdad. He's the dad who stepped up, something like that, ipso facto, vis-a-vis, concordantly. Anyway, let's get to this, that, and the third. 3 quick stories as we finish off the day here. Speaking of someone who does not want to be here, Tyler Herro really did not want to be in Portland. As Miami Heat training camp got underway, Tyler Herro, the Heat's guard that was the subject of a lot of trade discussion when Dame Lillard said, quote, "I didn't want to go to Portland, so I'm glad Portland didn't want me. I just don't want to be in Portland, so it's not personal with Portland at all." Charlotte, that sounds very personal with Portland, saying I don't want to be in Portland because it's Portland.
Tyler Herro said a few things, and he also said, and forgive me, I'm forgetting what journalist he said this to in Miami, but he said, not only did he say, I didn't want to be in Portland, but it's not personal to Portland. He said, I looked around the league, I know my value, but I don't have to say it. I'm just going to show you. And it's like, well, buddy, first of all, it is personal to Portland because that's a very Portland specific problem. And secondly, you did say it. You just said it. And you know who else looked around the league? Most other teams, including yours, the Miami Heat and Portland. So I guess it all worked out for you. But his logic, he's tying himself into pretzels over there, down there in South Florida. But I find it very entertaining.
I just want to respect somebody out there speaking the truth that needs to be spoken about Portland. I've spent a lot of time in that city with days off on the road. No, There's not an amount of money you could pay me to live in Portland, Oregon at all. It is one of my least favorite places I've ever won. Yeah, no. One of my least favorite places to have time off on the road was Portland. I'm out on that city entirely.
He's in Miami. Yeah. Like, no offense, offense to Portland. They need to figure it out.
I can't believe the Portland slander that's going on here right now. As a Pacific Northwest stan, I'm a little taken aback by this.
At one point, I had 19 days off in a row in Portland. 19 days off because of the way our tour schedule went when I was on tour. And it was a place they parked us. And everybody was like, trust me, I know you don't like Portland, but this is the time you will fall in love with the city. After 19 days, I was like, get me the hell out of Portland. I am completely out on Portland, Oregon. Completely out.
Yeah.
All right. At Jason Fitz on Twitter, if you want to direct your complaints to him or to Tyler Herro.
You just took the heat off of Tyler there, Fitz.
You know what? Tyler and I are going to be a tag team in the 80s, like 80s wrestling sense, and he can just tag me in and I'll come in and talk about how much I dislike that city.
Yeah, because when I think of people that make sense together, the unlikely animal pairing video of Jason Fitz and Tyler Herro, who to the point of this entire conversation is someone that seems to so uniquely make sense only in the context of Miami as a person and his general vibe, putting him in Portland would be one of the most insane things I could possibly think of. So let's get to something that makes a little more sense and get to that, guys. We have got the proposal set right now. According to the AP, the Olympics are set to vote on a proposal that might land flag football in the 2028 Olympic Games in Los Angeles. It is a proposal alongside baseball, softball, lacrosse, squash, and cricket, all sports that are trying to break their way in. But Charlotte, flag football is something the NFL has been more and more pushing as a part of the youth movement of the sport here as people understand and grapple with the violence of the game. Flag football has been an easy and accessible spot for a lot more people to get in touch with the game. And we've seen these leagues take over, become really popular in part with the support of the NFL. And now the potential to send any form of American football over to the Olympic Games was something that caught the eye of wide receiver Tyreek Hill, who said, hell yeah, let's run it back and get it over there. So I do like that idea now that we've done flag football to make it accessible to a lot of people. Let's send over a team full of our best athletes from the NFL and try and make sure we ruin everyone's good time with this.
Well, I think it would also be fascinating to watch professional NFL players play this on a high level, play flag football, because it does you start to think sometimes watching this game, you're like, oh my goodness, this feels very violent and everybody's getting hurt all the time. Maybe what if someday they just played flag football? I don't know. That's an insane thing to say, I suppose. But I think
like what every internet commenter under a post by the NFL when they flag a hit over the middle that would have been on Jacked Up 10 years ago. People are like, why don't you just put flags on them? Well, now they're going to try to.
And it's like, well, let's see. I don't know.
Also, though, the rise in women's flag football statistically across America has been huge right now. So this is an opportunity to show a different side of it. Here's the one question I have. Like, do we think the rest of the world is just champing at the bit to turn around and field a competitive flag football team? That's the only thing. Like, if we're going to add something to the Olympics, I immediately look at it and say, okay, are there a bunch of athletes in Russia that are like, all right, finally get to play flag football? Like, is Japan like tripping over each other, being like, we're going to have the best flag football team of all time? Like, it just feels like this is a very American-centered, but like we're trying to put a sport in, we'll win a bunch of medals at.
It feels like a sideshow.
And listen, I'm not above stacking the deck a little bit as we constantly try and battle for even more medals at the top of this. Because we saw flag football at the Pro Bowl, so there's some recent experience with these guys playing that. I'm sure there would be a battle amongst teams to not want to let their players go over and potentially get injured. But Jason, we have seen in recent years the NFL expanding their fan bases and delegating those overseas markets to certain teams. We know in Mexico the NFL is incredibly popular. Germany, obviously London, there'd be a bunch of people signing up to play for the Jacksonville labeled flag football team in London, I'm sure. So it'll be fascinating to see here, something to definitely put a pin in as we go forward here. But Jesse, let's get to the third and the most important note of the day here. One particular bit of motivation for a team trying to make a deep postseason run in Major League Baseball.
Yeah, the Texas Rangers are out here doing what they do best, listening to Creed in the clubhouse to get hyped for games. Bet you thought that's not what I was going to say. So apparently it started when they were like struggling in the second half of the season this year. And now they're saying that they hope that they can get Creed playing throughout the ballpark before the games because it would fire them up if fans started singing along. So Gojo, I know you're a big Creed guy, and Fitz, you are not.
Yeah, no. I mean, look, maybe this is a hate listen thing. Like you get so angry, you go out and hit the ball better. Also, why are you just asking the crowd to sing along? Creed ain't doing anything. Have Creed come out and sing.
Creed is going to get ready for a very profitable cruise where they are the lead musical act. How dare you, Fitz?
Oh.
I mean, have you sat here and broken down the New Kids on the Block annual tour cruise that they do? Because every year New Kids do a cruise too, but you ain't out here praising the NKOTB tour cruise.
Well, I could be. I would be if the Rangers were listening to NK.
Yeah, who abbreviates New Kids on the Block like that?
I couldn't do it in the moment.
They do.
I couldn't do it in the moment.
They do. They did a tour that was NKOTBSB where they went with the Backstreet Boys and they alternated songs.
They spell it out on the flyer like that. No one articulates it like that.
Oh, because you're a boy band expert. What are you doing here? You're over here telling me that Creed's worth listening to and then trying to correct me on the boy band lore. Like, we're gonna fight.
This is the Creed thing is why I love sports, because you can get something that seems so dumb and it actually works. The Rangers are like, why are we here? Because of Creed, and we're all like, cool, love it, congrats.
Yeah, really
I would set everyone
Portland,
listening
so I
to
don't have to
Jason
listen
Fitz
to it.
free to live their life right now and get him the hell out of here for his Creed slander here. This is a pro Creed house, and we will not have any of your nonsense mucking it up here, Jason. Go home today, everyone. Put on some Creed, live your best life, and make sure you download, subscribe, rate, and review us in the process. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you tomorrow.